Good afternoon. So day 2, I'm one of the folks who's not sick. Hope to stay that way. So I'll just spend a few minutes. The request was, hey, talk a bit about your experience. And the way I usually tell that is when I started at Salesforce, I was 6 feet tall and blonde. And then, that's the kind of beat up you get along the way. So just quickly on the journey. So like when Minder said, I started my career at Oracle, hardcore engineering guy. But realized that the business side was a lot more interesting and fun. So within Oracle itself, I moved to the product side, and then decided that I wanted to go back and get an MBA, got an MBA, and spent about 5 years after that in a bit of a left turn at McKinsey. And that was around the time where you're going through this transition from client-server to the early days of SaaS. Right? It was called ASP, it was called all other words. We didn't really use the term SaaS for, I think, probably until the 2000s. And then kind of got back into real work, did a bunch of startups, and some of them transitioning from on-prem to cloud or SaaS. And landed after one acquisition, found this really interesting role at Salesforce. I had known Salesforce as a company, I'd been a customer a number of times, knew Mark Benioff from my Oracle days, and said, I'm not sure there's something that compelling inside Salesforce. But when they started talking about, hey, we think we have a platform. We think that that platform is what we build our own applications on. But we can expose that to other partners and broaden our footprint and really ultimately also monetize. That's what I'm going to figure out. So I joined the team in 2009, so about 10 years ago, and that's the decade up there. And that was probably some of the most fun I've ever had, because in 5 years, that team grew from 3 people to about 120 people. The ecosystem in year 1, the whole ecosystem, generated about $1 million. In year 5, $1.5 billion. So in 5 years, it was a rocket ship of building an ecosystem where truly we were helping companies build their business, provide the technology. But probably the most fun was we were essentially advising them, helping them figure out what is their business strategy, where are they headed, kind of what's the go-to-market for them. And that kind of became some of the most exciting times. And Salesforce was a rocket ship on its own, but our team was actually one of the fastest growing businesses within that. And then a little bit later, I decided to leave Salesforce after 5 years to go back into something a bit smaller. Did a couple of, again, cloud SaaS companies. And then ServiceNow came calling. And at the time, this was about 3 years ago, ServiceNow, how many of you guys know ServiceNow? Oof, okay, this room is a bit unusual. Usually, we are one of the best kept secrets in enterprise software. ServiceNow is a $3 billion revenue company, $45 billion market cap. I think it went down a bit today. But most people don't know ServiceNow. And ServiceNow is a cloud platform. And it's another element of, hey, we think there's something that we can bring to the table that helps drive new businesses, build their applications, build their business, and help them go to market with a high-performance, high-scale, workflow-based platform. So that's what I joined about 2.5 years ago to kind of somewhat take the lessons from the App Exchange at Salesforce and apply that to a different platform, different environment. So that's a bit what I'm going to talk about. And then finally, just to complete that journey, about a year ago, I was asked to join the board of HubSpot. So HubSpot is Salesforce for the SMB segment, right? Sales, marketing, and service, but for a very targeted segment. And HubSpot is also going through a transition to become a platform company. So the common theme here is platforms and platform ecosystems. So in the next few minutes, I want to just share a few lessons and frankly, a few myths about platform ecosystems. And I have to say, I spent more than a time than I thought just searching for images on Google so that make this look a bit like a TED Talk. So lesson 1, that it's the copycat. There's a presumption often among entrepreneurs and ISVs that if you work with a platform, that their goal, the platform company's goal, is to take your ideas, see if there's some market validation, and copy it. I'll tell you, that's not true. Why do folks like ServiceNow, Salesforce, others build these ecosystems? The fundamental goal actually is to broaden the platform reach. There's so many problems, so many issues that need to be solved as companies go through their digital transformation that we don't have the ability, the resources, the expertise, et cetera, to solve all those. So a big part of the ecosystem is to help broaden the platform play. So yes, displace the incumbent on-prem, displace some of the old technologies, bring modernization, bring new capabilities, but it's not to copy, it's to really have the platform be the choice, and then have other capabilities in addition to our own applications on top of that. So that's lesson 1. Lesson 2, that it's all about the money. So yes, that's a metric. Yes, the rev share, which most of us have in our programs, helps drive the program itself, joint marketing, and so on. But this is, in the big scheme of things, the money is actually a relatively small piece. And I talked about the $1.5 billion of the ecosystem, and Salesforce takes a percentage of that. So do we at ServiceNow. But it's really about, again, a high-scale, high-leverage model to get more offerings, more applications in the hands of our customers to broaden the value, to broaden the innovation that's happening there. So the money is, frankly, secondary. And sometimes people get tripped up on that, but it's part of how we fund the programs, how we fund the overall model, right? Third lesson. This is an important one. This is one that says there's a winner take all, meaning if there's 3, 4 companies doing something similar on a cloud platform, will the number one vendor or number one product take 100% share or close 100% share? That's not true. Right? In the typical category, you will find, and let's just take from the Salesforce world, CPQ, right? Configuration, pricing, and quoting. In that one, there were companies like Big Machines, Aptus, Steelbrick, and a few others. And frankly, all of them in their different segments have done super well, right? So the notion of a winner takes all, and it's basically, hey, there's someone already doing something in the particular space that I'm interested in, and therefore I'm not going to go in, I think that's not a good idea. I think there's opportunity. Again, ultimately you have to be differentiated, you have to find something innovative, but it is not a winner-take-all model, right? So we actually want multiple partners, multiple companies in kind of similar spaces. That's actually enriches the ecosystem and frankly drives competitiveness and drives innovation. So it's not a winner-take-all model. This is probably the most challenging one in some ways, which is if you build it, they will come. So while we have these marketplaces, it's different in the enterprise world. It's not like what the Apple model is of, hey, you buy an Apple Watch, you buy an iPhone, et cetera, and the apps will start just flowing. You have to put work into it, right? So our partners who are successful, they put a go-to-market plan together. They don't just say, hey, here's my listing, I put something up on the marketplace, the App Exchange, or the ServiceNow store, or Atlassian, and so on, and now I'm just gonna sit back and wait for the money to roll in, right? You have to put in place a marketing plan. What's the value proposition? How are you gonna engage? What's the message? And that's where there's usually a fair amount of frustration, because people think, hey, I did my technical work, I published it, now what? Well, now what is the real work, right? It's the selling process. It's making sure you're engaging, make sure you're telling the right customer stories, and so on. So that one I often find, even with CEOs of partners of ours, trying to explain and walk them through that process, and basically saying, hey, the technology piece and the exposure is one piece, but you still have to put together the overall business plan. And frankly, if you're going to the enterprise, you'll have to hire sales teams. And with the sales teams, you have to hire marketing teams to help support that. It's not going to be a large, multi-billion-dollar organization. It's unusual that they'll go into a marketplace, click a button, and buy software on a credit card, right? So that kind of mindset of if you build, they'll come is not quite how it works. And that requires some forward thinking on that process. By the way, it's a small group, so interrupt. We'll take questions either at the end or along the way, okay? Next one. How many of you know Aviva? Okay. about half of you. So Viva is the ultimate success of a company fully built on the Salesforce platform, force.com, went off to become a public company, and I think at the last I checked, is worth about $18 billion, thereabouts. So this is a company that bet on the platform and particularly went into a vertical niche, in this case, in the pharmaceutical sector, and essentially killed it. They replaced Siebel in 18 out of the top 20 pharma companies in the first 5 years. So they've now become a billion-dollar company, and they're kind of the poster child. So when I joined ServiceNow, I was asked by the leadership team, said, who's going to be our Viva, right? That's kind of the metaphor. And I'm here to say, and often people say, well, there's never going to be another one. That one was just an exception. I'm here to say categorically that that's not the case. There will be other Vivas. There'll be companies that will solve other problems, vertical or horizontal. And it's about the power of the platform to say, hey, go find the right fits. And ultimately, it's a portfolio model, right? There'll probably be 5, 7, 10 candidates, and a couple of them will raise money, will grow, will kind of dominate their category, and then expand from there. So I think, hopefully among you, there is another Viva out there, okay? And as they've grown, they've diversified their platforms. Some of their stuff is on Salesforce. They're also using other platforms. So now they have a multi-platform strategy, and it gives them kind of more flexibility, but still leverage all that investment that the platform companies are making, okay? So that's, I forgot which count. I think that's 6 or 7. All right. So this is similar to that. It's all about the money. But there's this perception that revenue share models are a tax, that I am paying a tax to access the install base. Well, maybe it's a semantics, but no, it's part of that. How do you engage? How do you kind of fund the programs? How do you make sure, hey, call it the incumbent or the platform provider has an install base, right? And access to that install base has value, right? So there's technology that's being offered, technologies that's being built and offered. There are APIs that are being built, maintained, and exposed. There is a whole sales model around that. So I always cringe when I hear the word tax, because ultimately, it's what funds our teams, it funds the programs we put in place, it allows us to go to market with our partners. So again, sometimes the perception is I'm paying X percentage, and that's just off my top line, and what am I getting for that? I'm still, having all my other expenses. But the idea is it's a way to really build kind of that flywheel of the ecosystem. So don't think of it as a tax. Think about it, frankly, as a marketing investment. It's probably a better way to think about it. That kind of helps open a segment or a set of opportunities for your business. So this is a provocative one. I have a lot of friends who are VCs. I've raised a lot of money through venture. And there's sometimes this perception that you cannot grow without venture funding. I think in this day and age, because there are cloud platforms, because there's offshoring, because there's all these different ways of building and growing a business, I know a lot of companies who have actually bootstrapped. And they've grown to a pretty substantial amount by bootstrapping. And, for a bunch of reasons, they don't want to either dilute ownership, they don't want to, have someone else help them make their decisions and so on. So I think we're in a place now where maybe 15, 20 years ago, it was hard to build a business without venture capital. I would argue that today, with cloud platforms, with maybe a dual shore model with offshore development and so on, there's actually many ways to scale, to build and scale. Now, you can think about, hey, do I hit a certain threshold? Maybe it's 10 million, 20 million, whatever that number is, after which you want to grow maybe internationally, you want to maybe do some acquisitions and so on. That may make sense. But I will categorically say, and I'm actually a founder of a couple of companies that have grown without any venture, right? And they leverage cloud platforms. So I think there's some fallacies out there, and sometimes, again, people not willing to take a bit of the risk. But I think there's just a phenomenal environment for us to go off and build businesses without having to hog your second born. One more. So, and this is a discussion that happens with with investors, with VCs, with founders, et cetera, which is the platform provider the only exit possible? Meaning, if I build something on Salesforce or ServiceNow or Google Cloud, and I'm successful, and I create a category, create a market, are those respective companies the only likely exits? And I'll say no. I think the answer is, one, there's data points. I talked about Viva. Viva is a public company, went public on the Salesforce platform. There's been M&A activities in the private equity markets. There's companies like Spring CM, which is built on Salesforce, bought by DocuSign, which is not built on the Salesforce platform. There's acquisitions happening in the ServiceNow ecosystem. So this is more about, again, how do you tell that story, right? The platform helps you hopefully accelerate your time to market, helps you bring something unique to the table. But in terms of exits, it's still early in the days, very early. And the platform provider may be a likely outcome. It could be, Steelbrick was a good example of someone who was built on the Salesforce platform and became a natural acquisition for them. But that's not the only outcome. So I think there's ways to think about this in a more leveraged manner and say, hey, again, use a platform, use it to build and accelerate your business. And then, there's multiple options that are out there. And there's companies that are looking at, just yesterday, there was an announcement by Velocity. So Velocity is a vertical provider, again, on the Salesforce platform. They just raised, I think it was 40 or 60 million on $1 billion valuation, right? So that's the kind of opportunity, and they've built a substantial business of vertical applications on the Force.com platform in about 5 years, 4 to 5 years. That's pretty dang good, right? So a couple more. So one is this notion of, again, another myth that enterprise don't buy from startups. In my portfolio today, or in my ecosystem at ServiceNow, we have partners selling 7-figure deals. And in one case, just closed a couple weeks ago, 5-year, $10 million deal, okay? Being sold by a Series B, barely Series B company, to some of the largest customers in the world. And part of that is a couple things that help. One, what they're doing, what they're solving is very compelling. And as these customers scan the market, they're like, hey, that's the vendor that is solving my problems, has shown the right vision, is showing the kind of innovation, et cetera, that I need for this particular problem, right? So that's terrific. However, for them, a big selling point is the fact that they're built on the ServiceNow platform. So these large, mega billion-dollar customers have done all the validation, security, compliance, scale, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing that that company is built on that kind of platform, same thing with Google Cloud, same thing with Force.com, is actually a huge benefit because you don't have to go through the, excuse the language, proctology exam of a large enterprise looking at all the security and investments that you have made in proofing your infrastructure. So enterprises do buy from startups. They actually kind of prefer buying from startups that are running on platforms that they have previously validated or worked with, right? So there's a huge benefit, and I'm not here just to pitch it, but I think that's one of the lessons I've learned is, when there's companies who start and say, hey, I'll have to start small, I have to start selling to small customers, that's really not the case. If you have something compelling, something valuable, and you're building it with the right kind of mindset and innovation, enterprises do buy. And our ecosystem is designed to help that process, right? So they can leverage a lot of the previous work that's been done in again, performance, security, et cetera, and that becomes a bit more of a checkbox rather than a kind of a blocker, okay? So just to wrap, and this again is something that we're seeing firsthand, right? So we spend a lot of time, our executive team, we spend a lot of time talking to customers. And what we'll find is, in a typical customer environment, the cloud transition is happening. It's no longer a conceptual thing. But they're choosing, typically, 3 or 4 different core vendors. They probably have, yes, Salesforce. The front office is mostly Salesforce. They probably have Workday for the back office or for HR and so on. They'll typically have one of Office 365 or Google for the productivity apps. And more often than not, they'll have ServiceNow for IT and a whole bunch of other workflow-based applications. And then obviously there's some infrastructure vendors and so on, right? But it's never a single cloud. So the mindset in large accounts is cloud is here to stay, but I'm probably going to have 3 or 4, maybe 5 core vendors. And again, as those vendors are evaluated, the ecosystem of other applications and other capabilities that they bring to the table is more often than not an important criteria of evaluation, which is, hey, if I choose X, can I, alongside X, can I add Y and Z and W as additional applications or offerings to solve a bigger part of the problem, right? So we're seeing this all day long, right? We're seeing it in Wall Street, we're seeing it in Europe, we're seeing it in government. A multi-cloud world and a multi-cloud hybrid world is what we're going towards, okay? Everything on time, good? All right, so that was the few lessons learned. And again, it's been a decade of building these, so just a thought of few thoughts to share. Happy to open up for a question in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Avanish, for a great talk. So working at a large platform company myself, I could relate to a lot of points. I think I've definitely seen the Viva question pop up multiple times.
Yeah.
Some of us who do partnerships at large platform companies probably owe our jobs to Viva, I would say. I guess one question I wanted to start off with is, you mentioned large enterprises don't buy for the click of a button, right, from a marketplace, or not very often. Yep. So what are marketplaces good for?
Great question. So I look at marketplaces kind of in kind of 3 core fundamental elements. One, it's a marketing vehicle, right? So it's a place to kind of showcase what you do, but it's part of a marketing mix, right? So it's not the only marketing vehicle. 2, it's an entitlement system. So it's kind of where you download, you install, you get all the entitlements and so on. And 3, and this is somewhat optional, it's a transactional system. So I would argue the marketplace is good to aggregate the information, allow the customer to search, to compare, kind of do their research. By the way, 80% of the buying process in most enterprises is done before they pick up the phone to call someone, right? So the marketplace is one of the fundamental resources that they use to research, right? Are there good reviews? Give me a demo, allow me to maybe install something. And then the transactional piece is optional. So for us, 94% of our business with our partner ecosystem happens between the partner and the end customer. So only 6% actually happens as a transaction in our store, right? So I think you got to think about in the marketplace concept, kind of what of those 3, which combination of those 3 capabilities are important. And some marketplaces are probably a bit more biased towards one versus the other.
Cool, thank you. I have other questions, but I wanted to open up to the audience.
Hey, Avanish.
Hey.
Nice job on the slides.
Thank you. Like I said, a lot of time on Google.
Question for you. So I assume you have different partner types developing apps on your marketplace, from solution providers, system integrators, VARs, born in the cloud, ISVs. Do you find any particular type of partner more successful that you're targeting?
That's a great question. That's a great question, and I think we're going through a bit of a transition. So in the Salesforce world, most of them were very traditional ISVs, right? Started from scratch, built it on the platform, group, ServiceMax, Aptus, Viva, et cetera, right? All traditional, and if you look at the top 10 or 20, invariably, it's them. I'm starting to see a bit of a transition, right? And candidly, I didn't put it up there, and I'm on video, but I'll just say it anyway. 10 years ago, AWS did not exist. AWS has kind of become this 800-pound gorilla, right? It's become a bit of the default. So if someone is starting something, chances are that's the easiest. So you truly use a credit card, get it off the ground. But all of us who are in the business are still seeing growth, still seeing a lot of traction. So I think it's a bit of an alignment, a realignment that's happening, where we're seeing a lot more SIs who are actually building product or trying to build product, not because they want to become a product company, but because their customers and their clients are expecting that when they come in and do a digital transformation project or an employee experience project, whatever it may be, that there's going to be a leave behind that captures that and allows them to execute or implement on the consulting project. So we're, in our ecosystem, again, Deloitte, KPMG, DXC, all these firms are building and truly building world-class apps. It's not a utility or a tool or an integration. They're building full-blown applications. And part of that is, hey, they'll do a consulting project, and as part of the consulting project, they'll implement their own application, which then drives recurring revenue. So that's the transition that I've started seeing in the last 12, 18 months. And I think it's happening across the ecosystem.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. I think there was one more. I thought there was one more question there.
Great presentation, by the way. Thank
you.
What guidance would you give to a company that maybe is not in startup mode, but is now entering into these marketplaces? One of the challenges that I'm looking at is how many marketplaces do you go with, right? Everybody wants you to be in their marketplace, so I'd love your insight on that.
Yeah, look, there's no, it's a strategy question, right? It's a business strategy, business model question. And the fundamental question is, who are your target markets, target audiences, and which are the marketplaces that tie well into that, right? So if you're selling into, just by way of example, if you're selling into primarily a IT buyer, DevOps operation, Atlassian probably is the right marketplace for you, right? But if you're selling into a front office and your solutions are marketing, sales oriented, it's certainly not Atlassian. It's actually not ServiceNow. It's Salesforce, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with where are you going to find the right, and again, part of the marketplace metaphor is you're typically going to be selling into an existing install base, right? And in that install base, you need to figure out what are the adjacent or the complementary capabilities, and say, hey, here's, if I'm going into customer service, then it's probably Salesforce, Zendesk, and ServiceNow. So that's, I think, how you have to think about that problem. And I understand the challenge of maintaining multiple integrations or multiple models, but again, part of it is, like I said earlier, there are certain clouds around which the customers are going to rationalize around, and therefore you have to kind of figure out which ones make the most sense for your offering or your business. It's a great question, though. No easy answer.
Other questions?
Go easy on me now.
I'm gonna. I was wondering if there is, in your experience, if there was ever a partner you worked with that you thought wasn't going to make it, who did like a complete 180 and outperformed your expectations. And what did they do?
Yeah. I won't name names.
Right.
Yeah. But yes, right? And some of it has to do with, frankly, mindset, right? So again, I won't name the name, but there's one partner who I'd known for quite a while, and they were solving a pretty compelling problem in a pretty thoughtful way. But they hadn't grown beyond 10 people and maybe 50 customers, okay? And it was like, okay, every time we did a QBR, did something, kind of moved the needle just a tiny bit, but not substantially. Turns out, the founder, who's a genius technical person, really didn't have the kind of the sales and marketing DNA, right? And back to the build it and they will come, he thought, hey, I built a great product, it's in the marketplace, now it's not, what else do I need to do? Turns out, through some interesting conversation, we paired them up with someone who became an advisor to them. And in that process, kind of the lights went on, right? And that kind of became an absolute, so it was a bit of a, again, this is why I said in the beginning, the fun part of these roles is that ultimately you become a bit of a investor/advisor. In this case, was sitting down with this CEO/CTO saying, hey, you have something pretty compelling here, but in order for that to scale, you probably need to make some change. And he was one of those who did not want to raise money. So he didn't raise money, but he got kind of a new executive team who came in with resources, expertise, had done it before, and then that thing just took off. Right? And knowing you probably have guessed who I'm talking about.
All right, we're out of time. Avanish, thank you so much for taking your time and the great presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.